Hey everyone, this is James from AppSurify, and this is the first in a series of interviews with QA leaders and hiring managers on how you can improve your chances of getting a new job during these uncertain times. So, this being the first one of these interviews, I completely forgot to introduce the guest, but her name is Melissa Tondi. She's been in quality engineering leadership at a number of companies, and she's heavily involved in the Denver testing groups. And she's also a fantastic speaker. If you get the chance to listen to her, definitely sign up and listen to her speak. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's get into it. Your lightning talk was one of my favorite talks of the year, and it
Oh,
sort
that's
of
so
spurred me
awesome.
on to do this.
Oh, awesome. That's great. Yeah, that was I think it's funny because in my opinion, like the lightning talks are one of those opportunities where like you have the opportunity to talk about something that you're passionate about that might not have actually made it onto the
Yeah,
conference proceedings, right? And so I always take advantage whenever I'm asked to participate in those lightning talks. I try and take advantage of that as much as I possibly can. So yeah, so I'm glad you enjoyed it.
yeah. No, I think it was Tariq, right? He was the one.
Yep.
He was the person that selected. Yeah, he did a great job. I pretty much liked all of the lightning talks.
Yeah,
Um,
agreed.
and
Agreed.
yeah, I think Dawn's one as well was really good. Um, yeah,
Yes.
so I'd been thinking about doing this, something like this for a while because I think one of my favorite aspects of my previous jobs was always mentoring. And then when you mentioned it, I was like, well, yeah, this is something that probably needs to be talked about
Mhm.
more. That
Yeah.
there's so many good courses out there on especially test automation, um, but not so much about how to actually apply it to jobs, how to get those jobs, and how to, I guess, make sure you get that career growth.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to do this. And I figured now is
Excellent.
pretty much the perfect time.
It is you got us all holed into
Yeah.
our homes. So
And that's why I'm doing it, right? Like we're
strike while the iron's
I'm in,
hot.
yeah, yeah, we're in lockdown for the next, I think, 2 weeks at least. So I
Yeah.
had some spare time on my hands.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
so I wrote a post about doing this, and I
Hmm.
linked your video. I'm going to link it. I'm not so sure where I'm going to put this. I think on YouTube.
Okay.
Um, but I was going to edit it afterwards, put this on YouTube, and then link back to your original video. So I was going to just go through the essentially the questions that I sent to you earlier.
Hmm.
Um, so maybe initially to start off with, I was just hoping you could go through how you got into testing and sort of why you chose it.
Yes, that's an interesting journey. So my degree from university is in education, specifically science education at the secondary level, and I went to school in Oklahoma. And when I moved to Colorado, I'm originally from New Jersey. I moved to Colorado after university, and I found out that my teaching degree in Oklahoma did not was not reciprocal in Colorado, which meant that if I wanted to actually teach in Colorado, I needed to take a couple of extra classes. So while I was taking those extra classes to get my Colorado teaching certification, I took one of the first jobs that was offered to me, which was a project coordinator position with two companies that most people would know, IBM and Kaiser
Hmm,
Permanente.
yeah,
And it was a great job because what it allowed me to do was they had a need for some user acceptance testing and asked if anyone wanted to spend, extra time in the evenings or the weekends, to, if they would be interested that, that they would allow that. And so because I was a recent graduate student or recent student who just graduated and had no
yeah.
money, I was like, absolutely, let me do this thing that's called testing. I had no idea what that was. And I literally did it, and kind of fell in love with it. I became pretty passionate about it and had the opportunity to then move into a more formal quality assurance software testing role at that point. And then, kind of so to speak, the rest is history. For the last 25 or so years of my career, almost all of that has been spent in some sort of quality assurance software testing. And then more recently, in the last 12 or so years, I've been really focusing on the testing leadership aspect of my career, focusing on quality engineering probably for the last 7 or 8 years or so. So I'm pretty, most of my talks and most of my writing kind of focuses on the kind of modernized quality engineering role. So I've been really lucky to have kind of a very deep knowledge of the industry over the span of the last 25 years because I've been part of the industry for that long.
Yeah, I really like your story about how how you got into it. It's really interesting that you needed extra courses because so I was just in LA and there were New Zealanders that were brought over to teach science in LA, and I was like, how is it that you need additional papers, but they somehow
Mm,
managed to get placed? That's
yeah.
but also like in general, testers seem to come from such a wide background, and I think the best ones usually come from backgrounds that you wouldn't expect. Um, and teaching seems to have served you well.
Yeah, and
Um,
yeah, exactly. And I would say that, my degree, because I certainly had a desire to be a teacher, and where I thought it would be the more traditional in classroom teaching, it wound up being a little less traditional on the kind of
yeah.
speaking circuit and with conferences and webinars and doing this kind of stuff. So I've been so fortunate in my career to be able to kind of meld those two together and still stay within the industry.
I mean, yeah, the thing is, this makes a perfect segue to talking about mentors. I was like, like I said, I went to Portland. A big part of it was to actually meet up with my old mentor. He was originally based in New Zealand and then he moved to Portland. But a lot of your talk talked about, I guess, this is maybe the wrong way to put it, but how to utilize mentors to make sure you can get ahead in your career.
Mhm.
I was wondering, so how would you go about, if you were a new tester, how would you go about finding a mentor? Like, who should you look for? What type of
Oh,
qualifications or qualities?
yeah. So, I mean, qualities would be somebody that can certainly that has some experience within the industry, right? I mean, although
Yeah,
I think it's certainly not necessarily like there's like a minimum of years of experience then you can become a mentor, but somebody that can kind of speak to different either companies that are doing something or that are plugged into the industry because they're a speaker or a writer and they're viewed as some sort of a thought leader. So for me
yeah,
right now, especially, I mean, 25 years ago when I was searching for a mentor or at least figured out, hey, I probably need this in my career, we didn't have nearly the amount of resources, especially online, then that we do now. I mean, you can, Google any of the thought leaders. One of the things that I've done is, go through our big conferences or around, the globe and figure out who's speaking and then who's speaking consistently across those conferences. And then start kind of doing a little bit of research on them personally, especially if they, are kind of leaning towards like test automation or performance engineering or
mhm,
test leadership, right? And kind of where you may either want to learn more about that, or where you feel like that's where your career is taking you, that's a really great thing. And you can do a lot of that legwork on your own. And,
yeah,
just like all the speakers that I know of, I mean, there are very few of us that would never respond to somebody, right? I mean, after I speak at a conference, I'm very energized because I get so many people that either come talk to me afterwards or find me in the hallway or reach out to me, via any of my social media things. And then we wind up starting a professional relationship and dialogue after that. So I know every speaker that I know of anyway, they do the same exact thing. So I think that's a really good opportunity. If I, what I know now, if I had that opportunity 25 years ago, starting in my
yeah,
career, I would simply take advantage of the resources that we have available to us now that weren't available 20 years ago.
yeah. So my challenge is, some people have actually asked me to mentor them, and I've also tried to give advice on how to find mentors.
Hmm.
I guess how do you make sure that that it isn't a one-way street, right? That you're not just bugging this person
Hmm.
um, for, help me now, and that's the only time that you reach out to them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say the mentors that I consider that I have in my professional career, they have been a little bit more organically. found
Yeah.
to where I've found that I've worked with somebody really well, or I've kind of observed them. So most of the mentors that well, I would say all of the mentors that I have now, and there's probably three really good ones. I've worked with them in some capacity. So I was able to observe them, and my tactic was, what are the areas that I know I'm not strong in, and who do I know that I believe are strong or is strong in these areas that I am not strong in, and I kind of glommed onto them. And so I never actually had the official conversation about,
Yeah.
so and so, would you be my mentor? It just kind
Yeah.
of organically
Happened.
came about. And then next thing I know, I look back for the last 6 months and we've met, every 2 or 3 weeks, and we've had these really great conversations. And the next thing I know, I now have a mentor mentee relationship. And that's kind of how the people that I've mentored or am currently
Yep.
mentoring, it kind of organically shows around that. So that's been really fun.
Yeah. So I guess it might be important that they're in the same area as you, right? Like in the same geographic location potentially, or at least just try to have a more uh, how to say this, less one-sided relationship. Like try to talk about like general topics rather than can you help me with this?
Yes. And I'd
Yeah.
say, right, exactly. And and my preferred way of doing that is I like to have cocktails, go after, after work for drinks, where
Sure.
you're out of the office and you're in a more social setting. And so you generally start out talking about, how are you doing? And not just how are you doing on these three things that we talked about in our last mentoring session, but just generally. And
Yeah.
that, almost always kind of blends nicely into, well, let's talk about what we kind of talked about the last time we met and how are you doing here? So absolutely, if it is not one side, or if it is not two-sided and it's not a collaborative discussion,
Yeah.
then we're probably going down a path that might not lead to a successful relationship in that manner. So I mean, just as much as it's important for the new tester or the person who is seeking a mentor to, you do a little bit of research on people that they have found, skills that they want to either aspire to, or that they, want to learn more about. It is just as important for the person who could potentially be mentoring to also be signed up, right? Because I mean,
Yep.
the reality is that you only have a limited amount of time to be able to mentor, and if you're talking 10, 15, 20 people that you're mentoring, then that turns out to be a full-time job, which, I don't know of any mentors that where that is their full-time job. So yeah, two-way street, collaborative, those are the top one and two, I would say, priorities for any mentoring relationship.
Yeah. So for anyone listening, I would also like later, um, be genuine, go up to the people that do talk at the conferences and actually say, I really liked your talk and the reason why, and then maybe share stuff with them that you've done rather than just straight away asking for something. So the main thing that I wanted to talk about today is there are a whole bunch of people, like I don't know what it's like you're in Colorado, right?
I am, yes.
Yeah. So in New Zealand, there are a lot of people that have lost their jobs recently. So there are a lot of people that are polishing their CVs.
Yes.
I'm guessing it's the same in Boulder. What are the, what would you recommend when you're trying to, I guess, go back and, redo your CV or what are you looking for when you look at CVs?
I'm looking for the holistic quality engineer, and the way that I define that is the person who balances both technical acumen and user advocacy. It's not I'm not a big fan of kind of having, these more specialized skill sets like an automation engineer, where that is the only thing that you do is automate scripts. It's an extremely valuable skill set. But I think when we first started that role, that specialized role in the industry, and where it became more mainstream and adopted, we found some areas of gaps because that automation engineer's only job was to simply automate based off of test cases, and there was no expectation that they would know intimately the product that they were touching. They would just simply
Right.
produce code. And again,
Yeah.
that met a need at that time. But for me, I'm looking for quality engineers that understand that kind of technical acumen, to where not only can I automate, or not only do I have performance engineering specialized skill sets or whatever those technical aptitudes are, but that I also understand the basics and foundations of testing. I know that I need to really explore the software so that I can make or explore the the requirements or the acceptance
Yep.
criteria if we're talking about greenfield kind of projects. But I know that I need to be intimately familiar with the software as a tester in order for me to put together the right technical solution. And that kind of embodies that quality engineer. So what I'm looking for when I'm looking at CVs or resumes is that person that can demonstrate that they aren't not testing because they have a title or had a title of an automation
Okay.
engineer or a performance engineer.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess that might be even hard to convey through a CV. That might be something that you try to put through in the cover letter almost as well. Is there anything that you look for in, like, sorry, that you essentially disqualifies people? You look at the CV and you just, that one's not going to get an interview?
Oh, that's interesting. The only time that I would say like discount a CV would be that if truly the skill sets or like the tech stack that they've been working on just simply doesn't match in the company. Otherwise, if I kind of go through, I think we're certainly talking about the CVs and that is very, very important. But I think from the management standpoint, I have seen some really bad. I've seen way worse job descriptions than I have seen bad resumes or
Yeah,
CVs, right? So in my world, if I'm looking for a quality engineer, I'm not going to put my quote of balancing technical acumen and user advocacy in my job description because that's kind of a little bit of too much of a soft thing to put in there. But I will make sure that I write the job description in a way that where I'm saying like we expect our quality engineers to have that technical acumen and user advocacy. But for a candidate who might not have that job description to go off of, or it might not be a well written job description. I really like, you know, I kind of like the whole biography section, even if it's a slight paragraph at the top to say, look, here are the skill sets that I have, and a little bit more conversational versus a list of the skills and
yeah,
the experience in there. I think I've gotten a lot of. I've actually brought in candidates that have had very little testing experience, but because their bio or that kind of leading paragraph talks about what kind of mindset they have, I've brought them in and they've been like some of the best testers or quality engineers I've hired. So if that makes sense on somebody's CV, great. If not, then certainly in a cover letter, because I think that sometimes cover letters are not required. But if you can somehow manage to get that on your CV and on your LinkedIn profile, I think that's really important. I mean, LinkedIn right now is kind of the de facto tool that we all go to, and I never accept a resume without a LinkedIn profile. And if there are differences, I guess I'll walk back and say that one thing that would disqualify a CV for me is if it does not match their LinkedIn. Like if I can see that they're updating their LinkedIn profile and they're either it's very different than their resume, then that might cause me to have a little bit of a red flag raised, and I would do a little bit of digging. But generally speaking, if I get a CV,
mm,
the first thing that I do is look at them on LinkedIn, and then I might do, if they are a senior or they're kind of, or if they've put on their resume or CV that they published articles or that they've spoken, I will go and look for them and see if I can gather more information about
yeah.
them holistically, not just what they say that they do on their resume, but what the community has also said that they do. That to me gives me a very holistic view and allows me to select a candidate.
Oh, okay. So that's something that I haven't heard before, especially trying to be like, okay, matching LinkedIn to CVs. And that's interesting because that sort of like tries to find out the people that may be um, stretching the truth. But also, I was wondering about this. Would you, so I've always thought you should potentially tailor your CV to the job application. And I'm not saying lie. I'm saying if someone asks for, X years experience with X tool, then you sort of highlight that you have that skill,
Hmm.
whereas, or highlight that you've used a tool that's like that.
Right.
Um, and then especially once you've been doing testing for say 10 years, you've got a whole bunch that you can put in that CV. Just make sure you're focusing on the fact that you've taken those. Would you recommend doing that? Or is that like almost going against what you're saying with trying to match it with LinkedIn?
No, it's actually correlated because I do the same thing. Like
Yeah.
I have different resumes that I have,
Yeah.
through my career where I've tailored it to the job description. And I think I'm looking for wildly different things.
Okay.
Like, well, it says that you worked at this company from 2014 to 2018, but on your LinkedIn profile it actually said, I'm looking for things
Yeah.
because even small discrepancies, especially when you're talking about your online presence, and in LinkedIn, that is something that is 100% in your control. You control what and how much information is displayed on LinkedIn. So I'm looking for discrepancies between how thorough is a candidate, not only about their CV, but about their other social media and professional, presence.
So let's say you're applying for a job, they ask for, let's say, 3 years experience in Selenium and X other things. Would you potentially look to do a course beforehand? Let's say you were new and you didn't have as much Selenium experience, you'd been working with, I don't know, some other tool. Would you look at maybe doing a course and putting that in your CV just to essentially try to boost up the fact that you are prepared to? Because those, to me, honestly, have been the best candidates that I've hired, the ones that are like
Yep.
out there trying to increase their knowledge.
Absolutely. And especially now where courses are either free or they are very close to free. And especially
Yeah.
now where a lot of companies are offering previously paid for, training as free or very, very reduced. So absolutely. When I see somebody's CV where they have taken the time to put their courses in there, I know that they're serious about their professional development. And that in almost every case will move them to the top, even if they don't meet the minimum
Yeah.
requirements. And I'm again not a big fan of kind of having like you must have 5 minimum years of this
Yeah.
experience. We've all heard nightmares of recruiters who have those in there on a tool that hasn't even existed for as long, right? So I'm not a
Yep.
big fan of like the number of years. In only very rare exceptional cases would a minimum requirements need to be there, but because we're going to vet that through in a tech interview or in my first conversation with a candidate. So but yes, in those situations, if the minimum requirements aren't met, because it's a new person, then the coursework to me is golden because I already know that they are a
Yeah.
go-getter and they're doing things on their own, not just telling me what they've done in all their previous jobs.
Yep. No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
And yeah, the problem is those 3+ years, 5+ years, those are the job adverts that are most out there.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So let's say you've submitted your CV, you've been selected to have an interview. What would you go about? I mean, you've just talked about the courses, right? Like Test Automation University is obviously one of the big ones. What would you study up on? Would you change it based on, I guess you're going to change it based on the job description, right? Um,
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think like you can't go wrong with Selenium from a test automation, right? I mean, even
yeah,
if the company is, in a highly regulated field or industry where they have to have proprietary or commercial tools in there, those are, I'm seeing less of those and more kind of general test automation experience, but specifically the coding and fundamentals of either object oriented programming or whatever is required for that. To me, if I can see the evolution either on the CV or after talking with the candidate of how they approach a problem and how they have been resourceful within themselves to find out potential solutions for that problem, that's much more important than saying, well, I have 5.5 years using Selenium,
yeah,
WebDriver or whatever, right? So to me, it's you should be able to speak to the skills that you are adding to your CV because again, you get into the point where a candidate may be embellishing or maybe padding their experience, and we vet that out pretty quickly in a very quickly tech interview. And
Yeah.
those are very uncomfortable conversations to have when you eventually turn that, reject that candidate in the hire or interviewing process anymore, where you have to have that conversation to say, for somebody who had 5 years experience in this particular technology, when we teched you out, it didn't really come to fruition. So word of advice, make sure that your resume, your CV is matching those skill sets. So, from a technical standpoint, things that we should be looking at, test automation in whatever, there's some scripting languages, Python, Ruby, where that just is great as more deeper programming languages like C++ or Java. The key is to show deep knowledge where needed and where that pertains to the job description, but also broad knowledge so that I can see the evolution of your professional journey quickly on your CV. And then I'm going to talk to you about it when I start talking to you about it as that first kind of contact as the hiring manager.
Okay. That's cool. This is something interesting that I came up with as a question. Of the absolute standout hires, was there something that you noticed during the interview where you were like, this person is going to be great? Or because a lot of people say hiring is a lot about luck.
Mm.
Is there something that you've noticed? Or it could be in the CV.
My outstanding hires have always been because I've been able to have a conversation. My interviews are much more conversational. Of course, I'm not doing my job as a hiring manager if I have not already reviewed your CV, your LinkedIn, all of your whatever things. I'm going to do my legwork first. I don't know if that is common for most hiring managers or not, but I know that this is how, my approach. So by the time we're talking, whether it's in person or on the phone, it's going to be conversational. And to me, if you are able to have a conversation about your background and not only what you're looking for, but why you chose the company that I'm working for. And why this position, one of the first questions that I ask a candidate is, what about this position intrigued you to apply? If I get a question, if the candidate has not done any research on the company, that's going to be a red flag. I don't need, you shouldn't be coming to
Yeah.
me with revenue reports and all that, but I want you to at least know that you've done a little bit of your own research. A candidate that will absolutely not make it through is if they are not asking me questions or having that kind of conversational dialogue, because it that tells me that they will not be able to have those same types of conversations and be collaborative with their eventual team members. And conversation and collaboration, as our Agile manifesto clearly states, is a lot more important than the documentation or the process around it.
Yeah.
Most solutions come about by being able to converse and collaborate. So those are sure red flags, and that can almost be a guarantee that somebody will not make it past me and into the next path of the interview process if they're not able to have a conversation. So which means that my standout hires where we're both looking at our watches saying, gosh, we're 10 minutes over and we still have a
Yep.
lot more time to go, right? So, and we've extended things, or I've said, let's go grab coffee tomorrow. Can you, something like that. So it's where we're both energized and we're both learning from each other.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. If they can show that they're passionate about something and then you get into, it doesn't even have to be necessarily specifically about the job, just even showing that they've got that energy and passion around
Yep.
testing or whatever, that's, yeah.
Yep.
So with a lot of people out there, potentially facing redundancy, how can testers now essentially prove their worth, or even look at, how they can grow their careers now? What are you looking for the people that you want to keep around, that you want to promote?
I put a lot of emphasis on the community. I want to see somebody who is newer in their career, like the way that this first half of my career, so I'm 25 years or so in. So the first 12 or so years of my career, I was very much consuming from the community. I was attending meetups or reading the thought leaders' blogs or going to websites. How does Google test? How does Microsoft test? I was very much consuming from the community. The second
Yeah.
half of my career, I've emphasized contributing to the community. Of course, I'm always learning from the community, so that will never go away. But there's that kind of responsibility where when you've consumed from the community and now you've got something to say and something to share, you put equal emphasis on consuming from and contributing to the community. So candidates and people that have been very successful in companies that I've worked with and that have been on teams that I've been managing, they're the ones that know that even though ABC company, this is how we do testing or this is how we do quality assurance or quality engineering, they also have a good understanding, if not a deep understanding, of how other companies are doing that because they are researching that on their own. So they may be following specific thought leaders. And that is a very typical question for me as well. Do you follow any thought leaders in our industry, and who are
Yeah.
they? If somebody just looks at me and doesn't, it has no answer, I know that I mean, and there's a difference, right? I'm not going to ask that same question 6 months out of university, or the 2 years
Yeah.
only as a new person. But if they've got 5+ years, there is absolutely an expectation that they are doing something within the community, whether they're consuming from and still learning or contributing to, or both. And I want to hear them and why they've chosen that particular company to follow or that person to follow in that mode. The other thing is that as much research as I do on candidates, again, a simple Google search, I am still very shocked at how many candidates do not research me. I mean, and
Yeah.
and so, and not that not that I'm saying research anybody that they actually have an
Yeah.
interview with. And so to me, that is a very, very easy prep thing that you can do. It takes 15 minutes, depending on how strong or not so strong their online presence is. But that to me is another red flag of, if you don't know what I'm about, because you just didn't bother to simply Google search me or looked at my LinkedIn profile, then I don't know if this is going to be a collaborative relationship. And collaboration is way more important. I'm not a top-down manager. I talk and write a lot about that stuff as well. But it's a two-way street. Same as the mentor-mentee relationship. It's a two-way street for a candidate coming in. And I think companies and hiring managers should be in the business of selling themselves just as much as a candidate should be in selling themselves. And we're buying and selling each other, not to be so crass as to really do it, but it
Yeah.
really comes down to that thing. We're testing each other out, and we are seeing, can we work together in this situation? I think, and the onus really, it should be a 50-50 conversation, although most of the time the candidate should be talking more, but it should be a 50-50 conversation and collaboration at that time.
Yeah. Okay. So, wrapping this up now, are there any other like final tips that you have for people that are out there looking for jobs?
I
We've gone
think
through more than I
there's,
expected, so
yeah, I think, based off of the PNSQC, slide deck that I had, I think one of the things that I think got a lot of good feedback on was kind of this highlight reel that I talked about, and kind of go a little bit into that. So, um, if you have more than 10 years in your career, a CV, and especially if you don't stay with one company for many, many, many years, right? If you kind of
yeah.
have a lot of companies and a lot of experience across a wide range of industries, one of the things that I've found has been so helpful for me is to create this highlight reel, which essentially is a slide deck of, hey, you can either do it by month or by quarter, but it allows you to say, here are the things that I've done this last month. And it literally looks like a slide deck in January of 2020. Here are the 3 or 4 or 10 things that I've done as part of my role in this company, or things that were not originally part of my role, but that I've done because I've seen a need. That kind of gives people a remembrance that when you're asked to kind of go in and deep dive into specific experience that might be very intriguing to the person that's interviewing you can go back to that highlight reel and say, oh yeah, I did that in February of 2019, and here's what I did. And you can kind of speak to that. And so every month I update, or now I'm at kind of at every quarter, but every quarter or every month I update this slide deck that I've done as part of a company, and that becomes my highlight reel. And so it allows, it's a little bit more, it really kind of provides you as the candidate more talking points. Or if you're going into an annual review, performance review, if you're going for a promotion internal or another role, you can quickly go back to that highlight reel slide deck and see your
Yeah.
accomplishments a little bit more in succession and chronological order, and see your own journey and how you've progressed. Or, it may see, oh gosh, I haven't really done anything that would be on a highlight reel for the last 3 or 4 months. Maybe I should go and hunt for things that I would find valuable, and I think the company would find valuable.
Yeah, the the best people that I've worked with have always noticed. I mean, they've done this without trying to build a highlight reel, but they've essentially noticed, look, this is something that's slowing the team down. I've got some downtime. I can build a tool that will help out all of
Yeah.
these people, or something, some other way of improving the process. And then I don't know if they know, probably should note it down, because that's the type of thing that will help them either get promoted or get that next role.
Yes,
Cool.
exactly. And in my opinion, that's just been a tool that I've used for the last few years, and it really has been great. And so when I look back at company A, B, C, D, E, wherever I've worked in the last, even as a consultant, it's always good for me to go back to those highlight reels and be like, oh yeah, I forgot I did that. And that's something that is very much, it's very, it matches well with this job description, and I can actually show that. So sometimes your highlight reel, it adds to the CV that you are submitting for a particular job as well.
Okay, awesome. No, that's been great. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Melissa, for your time. No, I just hope this will help out some people that are out there, maybe a little bit downtrodden, and
Yes.
help them realize that there are jobs out there. I'm actually
Yes.
seeing like a number go through LinkedIn, and if they prepare, they'll be fine. Hopefully.
Yes, hopefully, right? And I think it goes without saying, but I'm happy to answer, once this is published. If people have other questions or want to talk with me, I'm happy to please reach out. Happy to answer
Awesome.
questions and talk.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah, thank you so much. I'll try to do the editing over the next few days and then have it published out, and I'll send you the link once it's there.
sounds good.
Cool. Thank you so much,
All
Melissa.
right.
Have a
Okay,
good day.
see ya. You too.
Bye.
Bye bye.